Hi, everybody. I'm Elisa Kemahort Page, co-founder of Optionality, and you are joining me today for another rendition of our bi-weekly live stream, Conversationality. And we use Conversationality to talk about the themes we have for each month. And sometimes it's my co-founder, Jory Desjardins, and I together, but often we bring in guests as we are today. And for those of you who don't know, Optionality is a community of practice for professionals who want to explore, get better at, continuously improve, leading an optionality-driven life and being able to pursue, have multiple irons in the fire, multiple streams of revenue, and understand that that has become the now of work, not the future of work. That is the now. And our theme for May was passion and purpose and priorities, and especially when you're under pressure to make profit. And Jory will be quick to always say that I'm the one who insists on alliteration all the time because I just enjoy it. So that was 5 Ps. And today I am joined by Eunice Brownlee. Eunice is a speaking coach, a storytelling coach. She's also an advocate and an activist. So she's exactly my kind of wise expert. And today we're going to be talking to Eunice about how to tackle passion and purpose if you don't have one, or you don't know what yours is, or you feel like you had one and it's gone, or you just don't feel the same. And we're going to talk about how she helps people tackle thinking about this with a beginner's mindset and a fresh mind, try to get rid of your biases. And as she helps people develop their TED Talks or other ways of expressing their story, how she helps them kind of strip down and think about things anew. So Eunice, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to talk to you for the next 20 or 30 minutes.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So before we really dig in, please share with our audience just a little bit about your background and how you got into this work of coaching people on how to find and tell their best, most important story.
Yeah, I actually love talking about this because I joke that speaking coach was not on my bingo card. It wasn't anything that I ever set out or aspired to do. It just kind of happened upon me in a really beautifully organic way. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I had my first business in my 20s and 30s I had a photography business. And then I pivoted into marketing. And so it was at the beginning of 2020, after many years of surviving the atrocious experience of the family court system from 2017 till that point, I realized that I really needed to talk about what I had been through as a mother, as a domestic abuse survivor, as a child abuse survivor, all of these things. And I really wanted to learn how to tell my stories better. And it wasn't a matter of me not knowing how to do any of those things, right? So I had been writing for many years. I think I've been writing actually my whole life, if I really look back. And I had been doing public speaking as a part of my job for many years to that point as well. So it wasn't a matter of me necessarily needing to learn the mechanics of all of it, but really wanting to know how I could be better at speaking my truth, speaking from my gut, and using that information to connect people with my stories. Because specifically when you're talking about domestic abuse, most people don't get because they haven't experienced it. And so it's a really tough idea for people to understand. So I ended up completely by accident, before the world shut down in March of 2020, I went to a women's speak circle. That was a speaking circle founded by Casey Baker. And the whole idea that Casey has behind her approach to public speaking is that it's all about the energetics. That when we show up fully embodied and we can fully embrace the energetics of the room in front of us, that we can speak from a place of deep authenticity and connection. And that was just so vibrant for me that I was like, oh yeah, I want to do more. So I spent that year and 2021 taking women's speak circles, taking master classes, developing my own keynote. And it was when I got towards the end of that process when Casey invited me to join her coach program. And I was like, wow, that doesn't seem like anything that I would ever have thought to do, but this is intriguing. Sure. let me join the program and see how it goes. And turns out I'm really good at helping other people draw the connections that come innately to me. And that's really what makes for a good public speaker. That's really what makes for good storytelling, is helping people to connect to ideas that their
Mhm.
imaginations otherwise couldn't handle.
And I would imagine helping them answer the question. I don't think it's just me that would ask myself, well, why am I the one who either is deserves to or has to tell this story? Why will people listen to me about this? Um, and so I would imagine there's a little bit of tackling that kind of self-questioning and getting people to tell their story as well, right?
Yeah, it's that, and actually the more common thing that I get is I don't have anything special to say, or
Mm.
my work isn't that sexy, right? Like, I've been DMing with a woman who I saw speak a few years ago, and her talk was so good that she's been on my lips, and I've been talking about her ever since. I still have never met her per
Uh,
se, even though I was at an in-person conference when I heard her speak, and I asked her, just have you ever considered translating this work into a TEDx talk? And she's like, I think that what I do is just it's too specific, it's too in the weeds, it's too niche, right? And that's what I find from most people, is that they think that they don't have an idea that is more universal. But the thing is our lived experience, the very specific niche work that we do, also can be we can draw bigger, grander connections, right, to the
yeah.
bigger picture, the macro level. And that's the thing that I have so much fun with, is like, how do I take this very specific personal experience and bring it out to where everyone can understand it?
That is such a great, because I've been to some TED Women events, some TEDx events. I've been to these, watched people on these big stages, and they are often talking about extremely niche, expertise and extremely niche problems to solve. And, um, the thing is, they do it in a way that makes you ask yourself two questions. Yes, how does this relate to me? How could I use this knowledge in my life? But also often, what can I do to help? What can I do to make a difference? And when you see a speech like that, you can spur people to action, and you can spur people to recognize patterns around them. I think that I mean, especially when I think about your topic of domestic abuse, I'm sure with there have been so many instances in just the last year or two where people still ask some of the same questions of survivors that they asked 20 or 30 years ago. I'm thinking, of course, of the Diddy case, right? And saying, why did she stay? Or why did she, that question about why stay? That question has been around for decades. And so that story obviously still needs to be told for a new generation of people to understand the dynamics. Um, so it doesn't matter if it's a lived experience that other people don't share, because we are all operating a world where we see all of these dynamics at play. We see other people, and we can get better at how we absorb their stories, and we can get better at how we react to their stories and the kinds of questions we ask, and how we judge or don't judge people. I mean, I see that as kind of a big value. If you can help people to understand, can you help them to not judge, if that makes sense?
Totally. And even sometimes it's the indirect effect, right? So before the case even started, if we're talking about the Diddy case, my sister watched the documentary about him on HBO. And it was her watching the documentary on HBO that helped her draw the parallels to the toxic work environment that she had been in, with a
Mm,
boss that was demanding that they do things that they all knew that they should do, but everybody was terrified of her, right? So it's sometimes it's not even this direct one-to-one correlation.
right.
It's, can I help you see the patterns that can help you see where those same patterns might exist in your own?
Yeah, that's such a great point. So you started working with people. So how often do people come to you and say, I don't have that thing. I don't have that thing I want to talk about, Is that most people?
found that the clients that come to me are in one of two very, very different camps.
Okay.
I have an idea. I'm pretty solid in this idea. I just need you to help me make it better. And then there's I think I might have something to work with, but I have no clue, or I don't have anything special to share. And the second group is actually my favorite, because watching that transformation of people discovering their own brilliance is so beautiful. I just can't get over it. It's magical, because it's, when we talked this morning with Claire, we talked about those reflections of what other people see in us.
Yeah.
I love being a mirror for people, because I think so many people forget how truly brilliant they are, because their ideas, their thoughts have become banal to them, right? They're nothing special. It's something that's always with me. And so when they share ideas with me, and I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And I'm like, really? I didn't think it was that special. Sometimes it takes somebody else witnessing you for you to recognize that, no, actually, I do have a secret sauce.
Yeah. And also sometimes you don't, like, stories have to have beats, right? You got to grab people, you got to take them on a journey. It's not necessarily as simple as beginning, middle, end, but they have to have like these moments that kind of centralize you. And I've done a little bit of keynote coaching in my time. And I remember one author that I had read her book. She has a story in the book that is harrowing. And it's when it was like the catalyst for when she realized, I'm in a toxic work environment, basically, and I need to change what I'm doing. But it's a very personal story. She was at 30,000 feet in an airplane and thought she was starting to have a miscarriage. So highly, highly personal. So when it came to her talk, which is basically about business and leadership and all of this, she didn't even mention that story, even though it was in her book. She didn't mention it. And I'm like, oh my God, that is the gripping before even the title credits. That's the scene where we're like, what happened? Tell me. Oh my God, how? And so it became like her first anecdote to say this was her moment of crystallizing, driven by an extremely personal story. And it would be one thing if she said, well, I don't want to talk about that. It's just she thought, well, that's a personal story. And I'm giving a professional presentation on this book about women's leadership. So, she hadn't kind of connected those dots. And I'm like, yes, but you're still telling a story where you just need to grab people and make them right away invested in what happened, and how did you process that, and what happened next, and how did that get you to where you are today? And I find people sometimes they have a preconceived idea about what's appropriate for a professional presentation, but we're all sort of humans first, right? And we all sort of want the good story, right? We all want to be gripped, I guess.
Well, and if we leave out the moment that's the catalyst to where we are now, the story falls flat, right?
Yeah.
So I even did it today. I just told you how I got to where I am. What it took me to want to talk about my story was my daughter running away from home on the first day of 2020. She was gone for 53 hours, and that was the worst 53 hours of my life.
Wow.
It's just like, I knew that it was all a result of everything that we had survived for the previous 3 years, and I needed to talk about it.
Yeah.
I buried the lead, right?
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes these are difficult things, like, accepting that vulnerability is a part of telling a compelling story that eventually has a greater good for your audience. I think that it's probably a fairly recent development that we all kind of realize vulnerability serves a purpose, and vulnerability helps further our mission, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And there's a difference between vulnerability and trauma dumping, right?
Yeah.
We're not going up on this stage and taking people through every minute of every hour of every grueling thing that we survived. We're laying the foundation and setting the context, and then we're drawing the meaning from it. That's what makes a good story.
Good. Can you just repeat that again, the difference between vulnerability and trauma dumping? I just think that's really an important point. Can you? I just want to hear it again.
I mean, vulnerability is me talking about, hey, I mentioned that this thing happened to me, that I'm a survivor. I can see this context, right? And then you
Yeah.
understand at least where I'm starting from. But trauma dumping would be me going into every grueling detail of every single day, and this happened and that happened. And as much as I would like you to feel what I felt, that's not safe and that's not fair or right to do.
Mm.
You don't want to activate other people's trauma when you're telling your own story, right? You want to make sure that you're creating a safe container and not creating a space where people feel like they have to give up and get out of the room.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that and kind of reiterating that. I just wanted to get I thought it was so good. I wanted to hear it twice. Like I wanted to reinforce it.
Yeah.
Okay. So when someone comes to you and they're like, I don't know, I don't feel like I have that thing. Because by the way, when you create a keynote about something, you better be ready to talk about it frequently and for a long time. So you better have some passion for the topic because otherwise you're going to get super bored with yourself, right? So what's the first thing you ask someone or tell someone to think about, or like how do you spark in them for them to let go there, if whether it's imposter syndrome or whether it's that they've thought it so long that it's banal to them? I love that, calling that out, Eunice, because I think that is so true that when you have a thought that is actually innovative and interesting and a different approach, but to you it's natural, you've developed it, you've lived it, so you begin to think, well, yeah, doesn't everybody think that way? Well, no, they don't. That's why you're going to talk about it, right?
That's
So
what positions you uniquely to talk about this thing, is because no, not everybody's talking about it.
right, exactly. So how do you break down people's defenses a little bit, or maybe you wouldn't use that language? So how do you start? Let me just say that. How do you start?
Yeah. So what I talk to people a lot about is getting out of your head and getting into your body. Because the thing
Okay.
is regardless of how you identify on the gender fluid scale, we all have an intuition. We all have knowledge and information that rests outside of our brains, right? And so the first thing is get into your body, get grounded, be aware of your surroundings, hydrated, and really just feel what is most true for you. And really starting with that, starting with you, I know this to be true. Or it could even be as simple as I believe, right? Like that's
Uh-huh.
one of the exercises that I learned in working with Casey is like, just take a piece of paper and the word I believe, and then just start writing a bunch of one-liners all the way, fill the page. Let whatever comes up come. Don't judge it. Just let it come out. If I believe that chocolate is salad is the thing that comes up in your brain, great. Put it down. Or if I believe that women should be paid the same for the same work, put it down. And then once you have all of that out on the paper without judging it, just let it be what it is. Then you can start to look at, is there a theme that's coming up here? Are there
Mhm.
topics that might be arising? Do I see patterns? Can I start to make some connections to the thoughts in my head, the knowledge that I have, the experience that I have, and start to put all of that together? So that's really the first place that I start with people, is start with what you know to be true.
Yeah. Have you experimented with using any kind of digital like whiteboarding tools or Trello or something to create buckets and like move things around and sort of like, they have those interior design apps where you can move couches around in in a digital room. Have you experimented with using tools like that? Or are you talking
I
about like,
love using tools like that. So if I'm
oh,
coaching in person, chances are we have a whiteboard and sticky notes.
ah,
Because I am always going to be that tactile person that loves my stationery. But I also use Figma boards, right? So
oh yeah.
I love just like starting to get the snippets of ideas out, brainstorming, using that design thinking approach of there's no bad ideas here. Let's just get them all out. And then let's look at what we have. And then you can start to cluster things in. And that's
Mhm.
actually exactly the approach that I take, is you start to like organize them into ideas and thoughts and put things together. And then what I do is then I'll take somebody through, okay, now that we have these kind of areas, what are some stories that can go to support these ideas? And now we start matching stories in with the different details that we're talking about. So whether you're talking about a very specific story that illustrates the context of what you're trying to talk about, or you're using the story as a metaphor to help connect people's ideas to a broader or more complex concept. You can go so many different ways with it, but it's really like starting to visualize all of it, how you can structure it. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I realized I should have asked you in the beginning the same question. So Eunice was there this morning. I interviewed Claire Wasserman about connecting the dots between your career milestones to help you figure out your passion and purpose. And Jory and I, in our conversationality at the beginning of the month, talked about how we defined passion and purpose differently. Because Jory had been kind of thinking of them as the same. And I was like, oh, no. I think of them as very different. Like my purpose is down to a simple, I want to be helpful. And then my passion is where I go apply my helpfulness. I go apply it in places where I feel like it will make a difference. And that was in our last conversationality. And so I asked Claire how she defined passion versus purpose herself, and she had a very interesting answer, and I'll put a link to that conversation. But how do you think about passion and purpose?
Well, it's funny because I actually was more Team Jory on this, of like they're the same. They're definitely in the same bucket until I heard what Claire said this morning, and I wrote it down, which is implying what you are innately great at, not even good at, innately great at, with what you are intuitively driven by. And that, for me, that is a definition of purpose. Is so beautiful because it's like, okay, I have these talents, these thoughts, these ideas that they're innate to me. I can't help but show up in this way. But then it's like, I really tune into that intuitive knowing of this is the right thing to say. This is the right thing to do. This is how I'm going to execute it. That was just so brilliant to me, especially for somebody who's always talking about listening to your intuition. What does your intuition tell you the next right thing to say right now?
So let me ask you this then. So sometimes I think women particularly get a lot of advice that's kind of what do I want to say? One-dimensional. Like we're told to fix ourselves a lot. And, rather than say, well, you're operating in a system where you don't actually control the environment. And so constantly this is my opinion, constantly trying to morph yourself to meet the needs of a system you have no control over can be really, I think it kills us slowly, and that's not just women. That happens to anyone who's like the non-dominant group. Right. Mm-hmm. And, so one of the pieces of advice that I think goes innately, it goes more directly to women than men, is this: trust your intuition. And I'm like, because it's, and there's value there. I'm not saying there's no value to trusting your gut, but I also think bias lives in our gut, right? So, and it lives in our intuition, because intuition, I'm always saying interrogate your gut, interrogate your intuition.
I love that.
And how do you get better? Let me say this. How do you get better at knowing that your intuition, you have freed yourself from how you were maybe socialized, from society's messages, from internalized, all sorts of external stuff that we internalize and really creates bias in us all? How do you get better at like freeing yourself from that and really understanding what is innately you, and not being driven by not always kind external forces? And that's the messages we tell ourselves, right? The things we say to ourselves about ourselves.
I mean, I can't underrate the power of therapy in that, because that's something like
Claire said too, right?
When you talk about that our intuition has a bias, well, where did that bias come from, right? Biases are fluid. It comes from those external forces, or the thing that I think that happens more often with women is the way we've been socialized to shut down our intuition, shut down our own voice, and listen to the ones around us. I think this is why we see so many women hitting mid-age that are just like, I don't care about anything. I don't care about anybody. Like, this is me. Take it or leave it. I'm, running around with no pants on in the middle of the day because that's what feels good to me, right? Is because we have gotten to this point of not knowing who voice is that's screaming at us from our gut, but we know it's not ours. That's the thing. And so it's
Yeah.
really starting to strip all of that away. And, I always talk about, like, let's not abandon our voices. Let's not abandon ourselves. But part of what I work through with speakers is knowing that this is their voice and not
Yeah.
the echo of someone else's.
Yeah.
So we do a little bit of that in the coaching that I do, of breaking down, like, where do these voices come from? Whose
Yeah.
voices are they? Never does somebody go, oh yeah, that was mine. I've had that all along. It's always
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I remember where that started. And they can usually trace it back to an origin point. And then they can, okay, that's not my voice. I can take it off.
That has been an unexpected common thread, because to close out this theme, we've done 3 live conversations in a row. We had a webinar with Dave Liu and Grace Huang Lynch yesterday. And unexpectedly, I mean, I didn't know this is where they would take it, but Dave started talking about his parents and the transactional exchange of love for a good grade, love for an achievement. And he and Grace talked a little bit about being raised as first generation, although Dave might be second generation, but being raised by in their parents' culture and identity, and those messages that they got very early about what would create the exchange of love and being having their parents be proud of them. And then this morning, Claire talked about therapy, and Claire talked about, what did you love before any voice told you you shouldn't love that, or you shouldn't be into that, as a kid. Go back, and then who told you you couldn't be into that, or what told you you couldn't be into that. And then you're bringing up very similar thing, which is to try and strip away and say, like, what were the messages I got that I'm my own person. I'm old enough. I'm a grown ass woman. I can leave those voices behind. And I really didn't expect the theme from these 3 conversations to all kind of tackle how we grew up and the voices we heard still influence us. As you say, as seasoned, we're people have been around a while. Like, you'd think you'd left that behind, that you've developed your own opinions, your own perspective. But there's advocating for therapy, I think, has come up in all 3 conversations, which I don't think I was expecting that necessarily.
Well, and just getting curious of where it comes from, right? Like, that's a core piece of the beginner's mindset, is being curious. So when these things come up that you feel so strongly in your intuition, like, this is it, interrogate it. Like you just said, interrogate your intuition, get curious about it, and really, like, separate, where is this coming from? Is this mine, or is this someone else's? And once you identify this is mine, oh my gosh, the way that unfolds into something else is so beautiful.
That is awesome. Well, thank you, Eunice. Please tell people, and I will include it in the show notes when I send out the newsletter, where can people find you? How can people work with you if they are intrigued and want to learn more?
Yeah. You can find me on my website, which is euniceBrownlee.com. It's EUNIC, Brownlee, BROWNLEE.com. Or using that same moniker, I'm on Substack at euniceBrownlee.substack.com, where I write about connecting the unlikely dots between things, where I can see the micro level of domestic abuse and the macro level of what we're experiencing as a collective.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Eunice. This is a great conversation. And you can find Optionality at optionality.life. That's our URL. Right now, it directs you to Substack, but there may be changes afoot. I don't know yet. We're working on it. And that's where you can find a community of people talking about the now of work and how to mitigate your risk and explore listening to all the things that you're interested in and figuring out how to have a more optionality-driven life. So join us next time for Conversationality.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me today.